Laughing Brook. Poetry for sensual consciousness. Between a rock and a hard place, there the stream of life flows, all none the less.
Through that darkest door. When I left that old familiar, when I said all my goodbyes, I could see it in their faces. I could hear it in their words. Some said you're crazy. Some wished they would. Across that shore of cannot, I pushed my little boat. I pushed it into the sea of unknown, which touched that land of longing, which laid before my home. All seas and winds and weathers came at me as I went, waves sky high and seas all flat that had me, until I thought I'm mad. And as I died upon my quest, shed all my tears, my shattered heart, my broken body, my weary soul, is when I woke up. Towering, beaming morning cloud, a scent of flower filled the air. I could not act. I could just take it into who I am. There it washed me on that land that all my longing had ever known. There is a way, if you dare take it, all compass needles show. Heaven's door for those dare knocking, the way of life for those that go. To live and see all that I always knew, to live and be no longer all important, completely me, completely free. The breath of life flows endlessly.
How death taught me to live. No one gets out of here alive is a famous quote by the Doors frontman Jim Morrison. He had this strange obsession about death, which is also reflected in the way he died. Yet there is something very true about this sentence. No one gets out of here alive. And this despite the fact that we so desperately try to escape death by means of medicine, exercise, technical devices, pushing it towards others, a classic, even sci-fi-like things like cryosleep and a myriad of other ways. As Robert Jordan put it so poignantly in his book, The Dragon Reborn, death comes to us all. But that little gem of wisdom certainly wasn't invented by him. It's as old as humanity. The quote continues, though. We can only choose how to face it when it comes. And in there lies another, even deeper well of wisdom that is well worth exploring. But before we dive into that, let me quote yet another smart mind, philosopher Charles Eisenstein. In his essay The Coronation, which he published in April 2020 at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, he speaks about the obsession of our Western culture with escaping and avoiding death at any cost. which in hindsight is exactly what we did during the pandemic. Schools and businesses were shut down, the infamous lockdowns came upon the land, and many more controversial measures. In hindsight, it appears that those lockdowns had very little effect on reining in the virus. But they did cause a plethora of collateral damage, from destroyed businesses to psychiatric diseases and even deaths. So it appears Eisenstein was right on topic with his appraisal. And the lack of reflection and learning about what we did then, why we did it, and what our actions led to, at least here in Germany where I live, is a testimony to this attitude of denial. We are scared shitless about death. It's the antithesis to all we're striving for. Wanting to live is quite natural and healthy. Yet there's something about our relationship with death which is worth pondering about. Rather than denying it, which is a form of madness given the fact that no one gets out of here alive and death comes to us all, we could think about how we want to face it. Which brings us back to Robert Jordan. Or if we dig a little deeper, back to the New Testament. In the Gospel of John, we find Jesus saying, "Very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single weed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds." Really, this idea of death leading to something new traces back as far as we can see in the human history. If death is inevitable, as it is, it seems quite stupid to deny it, rather than face it and make peace with it. Which is the basic point of all religions, but also a fundamental tenet of philosophy. Because our life is finite, we better wise up and make good use of what life we have, and not just take it for granted and waste it. It begs the question, what is really relevant and important? So rather than putting all my focus on extending the span, the duration of my life, which seems to be what we generally tend to do, I could look at the quality of the life I have and focus on that. For what would be the point of extending the span of my life only to live more drudgery and unfulfilling stuff? That seems quite stupid to do. But as a hint, fear has a lot to do with it, but I'll save expanding on that for another time. In his book In Love with the World, Buddhist monk and teacher Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche describes a remarkable journey that led him to a near-death experience. The book is cleverly written to introduce fundamental Buddhist teachings alongside Yongey's experiences. Facing death, he does the exact opposite of what we Westerners tend to do in the face of death. Rather than clinging to life or denying death, he ponders and meditates about how he can let go as totally as possible of anything he is still attached to. His intention is to face death as clean and clear as possible, without any attachments or baggage. In his reflection about this process, he points to the fact that everything always changes. So it would be mad trying to hold on to things, both material or emotional and psychological, or pretend they last forever. Them good old days, they ain't never not comin' back no more. And what is now will also perish, sooner or later. So I might as well make peace with that ever-flowing stream of change and direct my focus on being fully alive at this moment I have now. Part of the work I do with people is a format called Vision Quest or Vision Fast. It has been pioneered and developed by an American couple, Stephen Foster and Meredith Little, in the 70s and 80s. They curiously met while working for a hotline where suicidal people would call in. In its essence, a vision quest is built on age-old practices from indigenous traditions around the world, with roots going back to the earliest days of humanity. Those practices are based on experience gathered over many, many, many generations and human life experiences, tens of thousands of years. In practical terms, that means it's a proven format that has been used by humans for eons to come to terms with life. At its core, a vision quest means that you prepare to go out into nature for 4 days and nights, which you spend on your own to face whatever shows up in you. And things do show up. I've heard such remarkable stories of questers over the years. This format includes a ceremonial way of facing your own death. The curious thing about it is how facing your own death pretty reliably leads to the effect of becoming more alive, getting in touch with your own essence, and hence going forth with leading a life that feels more worth living. If you're curious, I'm including a link in the show notes for this episode on my website laughingbrook.net, where you can get a better idea of what a vision quest is and how it works and feels like. There is a remarkable thing about facing death. It's not a morbid thing that makes you suicidal, but rather the opposite happens. By facing the reality of death, I have become aware of how precious life is. I have also learned that all things in life are finite and have their time. I understood that while sometimes it is good and necessary to fight for things, there's also a wisdom in letting go. And not too rarely, that is an even greater wisdom. Because as life is about change, letting go means to go with the flow of life. And there are things in life I can only reach, I can only get to if I go through a passage of death. Some things will never be reached by holding on, but only by letting go. Those passages along the daring road of dying and letting go can be quite dark and brutal. I touched those areas in other episodes of this podcast, like Swan Song and Light So Small. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel and a freedom that comes from deliberately choosing such a path. An interesting term for this is transmutation. check out the episode called New Moon if you're interested in learning more about it. But at the end of the journey lies something that tends to be worth every step of the way, no matter how painful and dark it has been at stretches. As Matt Johnson of the British band The has put it so poignantly in a song title, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. It's quite a thing to face that darkest door. Just remember, without death, there won't be a resurrection.
Through that darkest door. When I left that old familiar, when I said all my goodbyes, I could see it in their faces. I could hear it in their words. Some said, "You're crazy." Some wished they would cross that shore of cannot. I pushed my little boat. I pushed into the sea. The sea of unknown, which touched that land of longing which lay before my home. All seas and winds and weathers came at me as I went, waves sky high. And seas all flat. That had me until I thought I'm mad. I'm mad. I'm mad. And as I died upon my quest, the abyss, eternal darkness, shed all my tears, my shattered heart, my shattered heart, no room to breathe, my shattered heart, my broken body, my weary soul, my weary soul.
The breath of life. Phoenix rises. Christ eternal. Christ eternal. Eternal light. Give me your hand. Give me your hand. Give me your hand. Accept. Let go. Let go. Let go.
Is when I woke up. Towering, beaming morning cloud. A scent of flower filled the air. I could not act. I could just take it. Take it into who I am. There it washed me on that land that all my longing had ever known. There is a way, if you dare take it, all compass needles show. Heaven's door for those dare knocking. The way of life for those that go. To live and see all that I always knew. To live and be no longer all important. Completely me. Completely free. The breath of life flows endlessly.
As all things end, so does this episode. Thank you for listening. But as an ending of one thing is also the beginning of another, there will be a next episode of this podcast. It's called Toroidal Ambiguation. And if you want to find out what in all the world this word monster means, you're invited to listen in. It will be fun, and it has quite a lot to do with what I spoke about in this episode. My name is Laughing Brook. I'm a poet, dancer, mystic, nature coach, and man whisperer. If you like what you've been hearing and you would want to support me, please drop me a positive rating and a comment on whichever platform you're listening to this podcast. Share it with friends. It lives by recommendation. But most of all, come back for the next episode. It may take a bit longer for the next one to come out. Your friendly podcast host is on his way to a vacation. But meanwhile, feel free to take a tour of the episodes that are already online at laughingbrook.net or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for joining me today, and keep on flowing, bumping and jumping with the stream of life.